Hello, everyone. Welcome to the newest episode of the Sens Hour podcast, part of the Hockey Podcast. And we are sponsored by the Customized Sports, your one-stop shop for all your custom sports needs. If you already haven't checked it out, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, either social medias, we have a contest going away that can give you a free kit for any reverse retro jersey that has been released. So definitely check out our social medias. And you can also do it through YouTube as well. You just comment what you want, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then share the video. Greatly appreciated. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, all that. But we got some interesting news going on in the Sens world. We'll start off. Timmy Stützle in Germany gets eliminated yesterday, but he had one hell of a tournament for an undermanned Germany team. You know, what's your opinion on Stützle after that tournament?
Yeah, I think he's right in that kind of MVP conversation. He's not going to get the nod because he's not part of whoever the final teams end up being. But he's right up there. I had Dylan Cousins and Trevor Zegras and Tim Stützle kind of 1, 2, 3, and I think you could kind of interchange that any way you want to. But he was dominant. There's no other way we could say it. He had an extremely dominant tournament, again, coming off an injury, not having played hockey for, as long as he did. Same with the other players, too. They weren't playing hockey. So it's really impressive. He is a year younger than the other two players we mentioned as well, and Cousins and Zegras. So to be up there with those guys, I wasn't expecting it coming into the tournament. He definitely turned some heads, and a lot of eyes are going to be on him, watching him at the NHL level now with the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. He definitely had a fantastic tournament. Ended the tournament with 10 points, 5 goals, 5 assists. Could have been more if Elias buried that open net early or halfway through the first period the other day against the Russians. I'm excited to see him in camp. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the Ottawa Senators once camp starts, what he can do to carry the momentum. We all know he has to quarantine for 7 days due to NHL protocol, but I'm excited for what this kid can do. He's starting at wing, and I know they want to transition him to center, but what is the possibility that he just stays out as a winger? Is that very much a possibility that the Senators, the organization and the fan base have to expect, is that he just finishes off as a center or as a winger, I mean?
Yeah, I think part of that could be answered just surely by the need that Ottawa will have. If they end up filling a void and let's say they find a number one center, then there's no harm in keeping Tim Stützle at the wing. He could be equally dominant. We've seen that in this tournament. He could be equally dominant driving play at the wing than I think he could be at center. So there's the potential that he does just stay on the left wing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think having a 1-2 punch of Stützle and Tkachuk from the left side for X number of years will be something that will define this team. If he does end up moving to center, we'll see what he could do there. There's some characteristics of his game that I think would probably be better suited as a winger, so I could see why they want to play him at the wing. He's not particularly invested in the defensive side of the game at this stage in his career. I'll say that. There's definitely a few times where he's cheating the zone a little bit. He's the first guy out. And, if you're Team Germany, you probably want that anyway, because he's probably him and JJ Peterka. And Elias had a nice, really nice tournament as well. But he's your only hope at creating offense. So Ottawa will want to see a bit of a different Tim Stützle. I could tell you that for sure. Definitely DJ Smith will want to see some sort of defensive commitment. And I think it's something he's capable of. I just think he knew in his own head he's got to be the straw that stirs the drink for Germany. So that's probably why we've seen that version of Tim Stützle, the guy trying to do everything out there for his team.
Agreed. And I mean, he did have some decent defensive zone plays and making sure that he was somewhat responsible in the defensive zone. I'm interested to see what happens if, he's on a line with Stefan and possibly Connor Brown or Drake Batherson, what kind of role they put him in that kind of line. And Is he going to be one of those guys where you're going to be looking out for a breakout pass every time he's on the ice? Or are we going to see him we know he can throw the body, he can work the corners. I'm excited to see what DJ Smith has in plan for him, and we won't know until January 9th at the earliest, I believe, is when he's available to join the boys on the ice. But I'm excited to see what he can do. And I know we talk about it often, Peterka being, not drafted by Ottawa, him and Stützle having great chemistry. And a lot of people did bring it up, how much is Peterka benefiting from playing with a guy from Stützle? Probably. Won't be able to tell until next year, because I wonder, if Peterka is available next year to go to the Worlds, I guarantee you Stützle won't be. He's gonna have to step up next year to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier when you're not the guy. I said this on Twitter, but teams were game planning against Tim Stützle, and he was still able to beat them. I mean, that's just how good he was. But when you have one player that's so dominant, especially, much more dominant than the rest of the team, it's easy for teams like Canada, it's easy for teams like Russia did yesterday to game plan against you and take away your side of the ice. I thought Peterka did a great job in his own right. There was times away from Tim Stützle that I thought he really did shine. He's a pretty physical player himself. He doesn't shy away from any areas of the ice. I think the bittersweet thing is that Robbie Järventie did not have a good tournament, if we're being honest. He had a pretty soft tournament thus far. Of course, Finland didn't get eliminated, so they're still in the mix. But Robbie Järventie has shown very little, and there was a lot of hype surrounding this kid prior to the tournament from watching his highlights. So it's a tough pill to swallow when you watch Stützle and JJ have so much potential together when it comes to Robbie Järventie kind of not having a good tournament. And that's kind of the guy that you took, one of the guys that you took instead of JJ Peterka. It's really hard to imagine that he's the better player. But I guess we have to keep in mind that Järventie is one of the youngest players in this entire tournament. He was one of the youngest draft eligible players, much like Quinton Byfield.
I think it's important to show that, outside of even Russia has struggled with it, but depth scoring across the tournament has not been very prominent. Canada and the US, they're stacked top to bottom, so you expect it to be depth scoring. But if you're Russia, Finland, Sweden, most of these European countries, you're relying heavily on your top two lines. And I think Järventie, no one was expecting him to really be a top 6 player at this tournament because of, there's a lot of returning players for Finland. They had guys who have a little bit more experience. And he's been on the third line, and it doesn't seem like, overall there's been much depth scoring. And I think that's kind of what hindered Järventie. He hasn't been put in those positions. He's on the power play, but not really. And it's just, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, unfortunately.
I think at the beginning of the tournament, though, he did have a shot to play with Anton Lundell, and it just kind of fizzled away partway through the game. It didn't even last a whole game. And, I was quick to point out that he was shying away from all the action. He was unwilling to get dirty. He was just kind of floating out there. He just seemed a little bit lost and a little bit overwhelmed. But again, on the backside of this, we know he's a skilled player because we've seen what he could do in a great league in Finland, playing against men. So it's important to realize that the World Juniors is such a small sample, and we've said this before on this show. You don't sort of take the outstanding performances as this player is going to be a dominant player in the NHL, and you don't take the really weak performances as this player is going to be a complete bust. You've got to find some middle ground because it's a small sample size. People are getting different roles on their teams. Järventie didn't even really have a role last game.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at Järventie, I'm pretty sure it was his first tournament on North American ice, or one of his first tournaments on North American ice. Lundell's been there. This is his third tournament, or second tournament. Would have been here last year if he didn't get hurt. I think that's also something that needs to be talked about, is that these guys aren't used to playing on North American ice. And then you have guys like Stützle where it doesn't matter. But with Järventie, his game is so much about getting lost in the shuffle and finding those open spots. It's a lot harder to do that when you're on North American ice, when you're so used to such a bigger ice surface, over in Finland. And I think that's kind of where he got lost a little bit this tournament.
It would be nice to see Europe develop some kind of, or even the NHL meet them halfway, and everyone kind of develops the same size ice surface so that we could stop having these huge differences and adjustments for some of these players coming back and forth like that. Because I think you're right, especially with Järventie. He does seem like a player that would benefit from more time and space right now. Being a little bit hesitant, it's probably overwhelming at how fast the game is played versus playing on the bigger ice surface.
Yeah, and I mean, I think goalies are also a big one that gets affected, right? You don't have a lot of European goalies coming over and dominating right away. You have very few goaltenders that do it. Obviously, guys like Samsonov and Vasilevsky, the Russians are very, they're abnormal. They don't follow the rule. If you look at Lundqvist, he spent a couple of years over in Europe and then coming over. Hogberg, Gustafsson for Ottawa they took a little bit longer to develop because they had to get used to the North American ice surface. And if you're a goaltender, that's a whole other kettle of fish because your angles, your timing, everything is off when you're adjusting to that smaller ice surface. Personally, I would have loved to see the NHL go to a hybrid ice. I know a lot of the European leagues have it. Having it a little bit wider would open up the game so much more, and you'd probably see more scoring.
I think at the pace that the game's being played now, I think it's appropriate for the NHL to look at expanding their surface. And I think it benefits the skilled players. Like someone like Tim Stützle would benefit from having more ice to work with, especially on the power play. So to me, I think the argument against it is that it slows the pace of the game down and you don't have this intensity, but it's going to showcase more offense and the things that you want to sell if you're the NHL. So to me personally, it's been something that should have been done probably for a few years now. So hopefully they do decide. I think they'll have to decide to go with that eventually at the way the game is going.
100% agree. So, before we move on to our next segment, which will be about Brannstrom, who are your top three players at this tournament so far? If it's not Stützle at number one, so what are your number three?
So aside from Stützle, because I think he would be right in that mix in the top three, I would say Anton Lundell's been really, really good. He's looking like an NHL player out there. So I would put him at number three. At number two, I'll go with Dylan Cozens. He's just been dominant in basically in all areas of the ice. Really, really good up-and-coming player for the Sabres. And at number one has to be Trevor Zegras. He's just been exceptional. The hands, the skill. He's got the finishing abilities, the passing. Him and Stützle have been, kind of neck and neck. But I would give him the edge right now. If I'm being, 100% unbiased, I would say Trevor Zegras. What about you?
I agree. My top three, I had Zegras at number one because, he's been the straw that stirs the USA attack. 15 points in 5 games is ridiculous. He's already tied the amount of assists he had last tournament with 9 during yesterday's win. I think he's going to go to Anaheim and he's going to dominate. We're going to see him in a top 6 role this season. I hope Ducks fans are excited for him and are excited to see him. Even Drysdale going to camp. Those two are going to be fun to watch if you're a Ducks fan. Number 2, Buffalo, you got a great one, Dylan Cozens. He looks like he's going to fit in perfectly. Second line, first line with Eichel or behind Eichel. He can play center wing. I love the kid. He's going to have a really solid NHL career. Number 3 was a little bit of a toss-up for Stützle and Lundell because they're both so important to their team. I give it to Stützle because I think if you were to remove Lundell, Finland is still second in B pool or in A pool. He's still second. Like they're still in the same position that they're in now. If you remove Stützle from Germany, Germany isn't even into the quarterfinals. They're probably last in Group A, looking at like a 0-4 record, and just getting blown out almost every game. So I got put Stützle at number 3, and an honorable mention to Devon Levi.
Levy. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah, Devon Levi, because he has just been great. A 7th-round pick to Florida. He played for the Carleton Place Canadians in the CCHL, and he was like 34-2-1 last year, ridiculous numbers, and he wasn't even at selection camp. And I think that's what makes it so important is that he wasn't even in the summer camp. He came in, won the starting job from Garand, who was expected to be the starter as of last year, and he's made the saves that needed to be made. And he's just been there when Canada has needed him. He hasn't been super tested because, you're playing Finland and then your only competition really was the Czechs outside of that. But he's made the important saves, and I expect him to continue to have that dominant tournament.
How impossible is it to scout young goaltenders? Because this is another one that's kind of, like you said, a 7th-round pick, just kind of comes out of nowhere. And now all of a sudden he's a big deal and he's looking like the best goalie in the tournament. When you have other goalies there like Askarov, who to me is really struggling, especially with shots up high. I was impressed by his athleticism early in the tournament, but it's clear that he's overplaying pucks and he's exposing the upper half of the net every game. Pucks are bouncing off him. His rebound control hasn't been good. His vision hasn't been good. He hasn't been able to see through traffic. Versus someone like Levi, a 7th-round pick the year previous to Florida, looks like the much better goaltender right now. It's just impossible to scout these guys. I don't get it.
I think it's because, again, bigger ice surface for Askarov in Russia. Completely different angles. You have a completely different set of how you're approaching the games and approaching the players. So I wouldn't read too much into how Askarov's playing in this tournament because he's still adjusting to the European ice, like the North American ice surface. I think with Levi, though, is that because he played in the junior league, he didn't play in the OHL, he didn't play in the CHL where you're expected to get drafted into the NHL. He went the university route. I think he's going to Northwestern, or he's a freshman at Northwestern this year. And I think teams were expecting to see more of him through that. I think Florida drafting him in the 7th round was kind of a surprise. It was like we really like what we've seen out of this guy in junior, but we're not, 100% sold. I think he honestly, if Florida didn't draft him and the NCAA had a regular year, he was playing in Northwestern, you add in this tournament, he's probably one of the first goalies picked 3rd or 4th round in this year's draft, if he's not picked by Florida.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think he's just looked extremely poised for a kid his age on this big stage. That's not an easy thing to do. We've seen many Canadian goaltenders kind of falter, especially when they're playing those games where they get like 13 shots in an entire game. You're just kind of cold trying to stop pucks. But Levi's looked unflappable. He looks extremely good. I
think, everyone's penciling Spencer Knight as the next goalie of the Florida Panthers. If Spencer Knight isn't careful, if he doesn't realize that Levi can overtake him, he's going to be in some serious trouble. And I wouldn't be surprised over the next couple of years to see that goalie battle progress, and Levi could end up on top.
Yeah, no question. It's just there's no certainty when it comes to goaltenders. Again, I don't know why in the world you would draft a goaltender in the top 10 even. I don't know. You're playing with fire, definitely. And you could find some of these gems in the 7th round. Some of them aren't even drafted. It's just goaltenders in my mind should be drafted at a later age. It's impossible to predict when you're drafting a 17-year-old goaltender. We need to see goaltenders at 20 at least to get a sense of what they're going to be in the NHL, because they don't mature till NHL readiness until they're at least in their early 20s. Binnington's the prime example. He came into the scene at 25. Hogberg's another one who could end up being, depending on how the lottery or the expansion draft goes, he could end up being the starter for Seattle next year. There's a lot of question marks around that, but Decord's another one. Comes in at 23, 24 out of Arizona State. He started his season last year in the CHL, came up, him and Gustafsson, once Hogberg was up here basically full time, kind of controlled the net. And you're looking at Decord under NHL contract next year. We could see Hogberg in Seattle, unfortunately, as much as I love him, and then Decord
comes in as our backup behind Murray. Like, there's a lot of situations where goaltenders don't develop until their mid-20s. We don't get a Carter Hart or a Vasilevsky, Samsonov kind of starting to demand the net at like 21, 22. It's usually around 23, 24 where we really start seeing those goalies demand the net.
Yeah, if I'm an NHL GM, I am kind of going in with a mindset of I don't draft a goalie until after the 4th round, at least. Because even on the open market, like to acquire a number 1 goalie isn't going to cost you a ton of money. Like it doesn't cost you a ton. We just seen Ottawa grab Matt Murray for a 2nd round pick, and he's going to be, for the foreseeable future, he's going to be their number 1 guy. So, I mean, goalies don't cost a ton of assets on the open market. And I really don't see a point of drafting them because you just don't know what you're going to get before the 4th round. I think it's a waste of a draft pick.
I agree 100%. But, you know, we can talk about goalie draft picks and the amount of luck that it takes to draft one and develop one. But we got to move on to Brandstrom. His name has been swirled around the trade rumor like no tomorrow. DJ Smith still wants him working on the left side. There's a lot of uncertainty around this man, and it kind of goes into into the next question. But what do you see Brandstrom? Like, where do you see Brandstrom fitting? Left side. You know, you have Sanderson in the wings. You have Wolanin, who could show that he can be an NHL defenseman this year. You have obviously Shabbat. So why do you think DJ Smith is still forcing this left side deal on Brandstrom?
Yeah, it's confusing to me as a fan because, you know, every time we look at this situation, this team we know is built for the future. So what are we doing this year? We're really looking at a roster that will amount to the roster we're hoping it will be in either next year, probably the year after, where, you know, everyone is there and we're really starting to look at contending. So we're definitely looking down the road a little bit. And when you have DJ Smith come out and Pierre Dorion several times, you know, just being reluctant to send Brandstrom to his preferred side, which, you know, he came out and said himself that he's more comfortable playing the right side. And you can't help but notice Jake Sanderson there. You can't help but notice Christian Wolanin, you know, who's probably a breakout candidate this season. And Thomas Chabot, of course, being the number 1 defenseman in Ottawa. It's like, where does Brandstrom fit in? I have no idea now. At this stage, it's confusing a little bit. You know, could they, again, just be trying to ease him into the NHL, have him comfortable first on his strong side, and then decide later on down the road, now that you're comfortable, now we'll send you over to the right side and see what you could do there? Absolutely, that could be the case. Maybe we're overanalyzing this and overreading into it. But you can't help but wonder if Brandstrom is kind of the perfect trade chip now that Ottawa's acquired Jake Sanderson.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it also has to do with injuries, right? If you're looking at Brandstrom and you're like, okay, well, we have another puck-moving defenseman on the left side. Cool, that's fantastic. But what if Shabbat gets hurt? We're going to lose that, so we can fill. So getting Brandstrom comfortable playing on the left side is a good idea. You know, if he's already comfortable playing on the right, you don't need to put him there anymore. You can just leave him there and he'll be fine. So having him right now play, okay, we're going to have you work on your left side because if Shabbat gets hurt, you're going to move over to the left side. And I think if that's the case, then that's very smart. It's a smart asset management where you're like, okay, we know what you can do on the right. We need to improve you on the left side because if Shabbat goes out long-term, Sanderson goes out long-term, we can fill you in on the left side and you'll feel comfortable. You'll be able to play there without missing a beat. Everything will be just as natural as it were on the right side. And I agree on that mentality if that's what they're doing. And obviously they're not going to come out and say it because that would not be ideal. But if that's DJ Smith's thinking, which I believe it could be, I have no issue with it. But I agree, you know, perfect trade chip at this point.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it's just a matter of them wanting to give Brandstrom time to develop. I think they want him to develop on a side that's easier to play because it is obviously as a defenseman, it's easier to play your strong side because your stick is open to all the passing lanes. You can, you know, use your strength to cross over the opposite side of the ice. It is easier theoretically to play your strong side. So as a lefty, it's easier to play the left side than it is the right side. So it could be literally just a matter of development. Like they want to see him get really comfortable and start producing, because he hasn't produced anything yet at the NHL level on his strong side before they even consider him a right side defenseman, or a guy that's versatile enough to play that opposite side, because it takes a lot of skill to play the other side in the NHL. It could be something like that, but I think you made a fair point as well. Could it be injury kind of prevention? It could be, but then I would kind of wager if he could play both sides, then it doesn't really matter. If Chabot got injured, they could say, okay, now you're going back to the left side and you're going to play over there for a little while.
Which is what I was saying, is that like it gives them flexibility of like, okay, you're going to the left side, but everything is just as natural playing on the left side as it would be the right, and you don't see any gaps in his game. You don't want him going over to the left side where, a play that he would make on the right side is a little bit harder for him on the left, kind of thing. So I have no issue with him going on the left side, but I also wouldn't be upset if we traded him.
Yeah, and personally, I don't have him in my roster right now. Like I don't have him starting the season with the Ottawa Senators. It's great, except for the fact that the right side is not. So
that's true.
I mean, it is great to have, like you said, they are spoiled with the left side of the D, but we're hoping that this roster gets rounded out sooner than later. And, we don't want to be stuck in a rebuild for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So they do have to get something sorted out. But as I was saying, I don't have Brandstrom starting with the Ottawa Senators. He could. I know they said some very positive things about that, perhaps yesterday with DJ Smith, just alluding to the fact that he might get some time at the start of the season. But it does kind of lead us to this next discussion. And I know you were talking about him being the perfect trade chip. So why not mention it? Pierre-Luc Dubois has been rumored. He is on the block. There's no question. They've came out and said he's publicly on the trade block. He just signed a 2-year bridge deal worth $5 million per. So nothing long-term with Columbus. And he wants a change of scenery. This is the perfect player for the Ottawa Senators, is it not?
I 100% agree. I think Dubois would slot in as our number one center. Beside Tkachuk, you can throw whoever you want on his right wing. Doesn't matter. He's a play driver. He's fantastic. I don't know. I just think that he would be he fits the age. He's close friends with Chabot. Like, what else more do you need?
You would be hard pressed to find a better fit than Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I think that's why Sens Twitter kind of went into a frenzy. It was as soon as it was announced that he's on the trade block, everyone in their right mind was making trade proposals, perhaps for acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois. So, Shane, what would a trade proposal realistically look like if you could see both something for Columbus and Ottawa?
Unfortunately, you're looking at Brandstrom, most likely a guy like Norris, Pinto. I don't see Logan Brown being involved, but though, like I would expect a kind of like a Norris, Pinto, or a Norris, Brandstrom, and probably a 2021 first. And I know a lot of people would be hesitant on trading that first. They'll probably be top 10, probably even a top 5 pick. But with the draft this year, there's so much uncertainty around players because some of them haven't played. Some of them are playing infrequently because of COVID. It's so hard to judge. I would be okay. And realistically, I guarantee you Beniers is the top rated center in this draft. I do not think Beniers turns out to be better than Dubois.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you have to warrant. I think it's the same thing when they traded a first round pick for Duchesne, is that one, they probably didn't expect it to be a top 5 pick 2 years in a row. But you have to look at it. It's like, okay, well, if we trade this pick, we have to make sure that, the guys that will be available won't be better. And I think that's kind of where you're at with Dubois, is that no one in this draft class will be better than Dubois for your team.
And to me, that's a deal that gets it done. I mean, that's the difference right there. It's an unprotected first round pick. Hopefully not first overall, but an unprotected first round pick combined with one of, like you said, Pinto or Norris would probably be the two centers that they would want to pick from. And Erik Brannstrom would be kind of I don't know if he would be the centerpiece or if Norris would be the centerpiece of that trade. But I guess it would just be one of those trades with kind of three centerpieces, because you're right, the pick would likely be a top 10 pick. Although with Dubois in the mix, maybe it wouldn't. I mean, he does make a significant impact to the center ice position, and Ottawa did go out and get a ton of depth at center aside from that, and they have Dadonov and they have Stützle. Like, if you added Pierre-Luc Dubois, I mean, that changes your whole landscape this season. So,
like, you can also move Tierney. Tierney is on a friendly contract. You could add him into the package to kind of remove Norris, because Tierney isn't, like, he's 26, I believe, or 25, 26. He'll be UFA at the end of the year, but he's a team-friendly contract, and he'll add to the scoring touch that you guys need. You add a guy like Brannstrom, kind of can slot in on your left side behind. I think Werenski is your left side, your top pairing left side defenseman. He can slot in as a second pairing. I would be totally okay with this trade. I think if you're Columbus, Dubois is disgruntled. Yeah. You let Panarin walk. You let Bobrovsky walk. You can't let Dubois walk. And you can't keep him there and let his trade value diminish. Because if he gets hurt, any kind of serious length injury will ruin his trade value.
And his trade value right now it's ultra high, because he's coming off a standout performance in the playoffs. He was their best player. Aside from Seth Jones, Dubois was their best player up front, bar none, in the playoffs.
100%. I think if you were going to look at the top three players for Columbus, it was Korpisalo, Jones, and Dubois. Those were their top three players in the playoff run that ended in a Game 5 loss to Toronto, or with a Game 5 win over Toronto. Yeah. Ended in a second round loss to Tampa. It's just, personally, I just look at it like you need to, if you're a Sens fan, you want Dorion to go make this move. This is the move that you've stockpiled these prospects for. This is the move that you've stockpiled the picks. This is the move that will show the fan base, outside of signing Tkachuk, you're ready to put the last 3 years behind us, and we're going to start competing. This is the move you have to make.
Yeah. And that's why you go in strong like that. And that's a deal that gets done, to me. I mean, Columbus is not going to find a better deal than the one you just tabled right there. And we're talking about Erik Brannstrom, who came 1-for-1 for Mark Stone. I mean, we're talking about Josh Norris, whose value is oozing right now. Everybody is talking about Josh Norris and his potential. He was the rookie of the year in the AHL. This is potentially a top 6 center, a really good one that you could replace Dubois with, and a first round pick unprotected. I mean, and yes, I'm right with you. I would be 100% comfortable offering that package, because I don't think any one of those players has a ceiling higher than what Dubois is right now. And we know what he is. It's certain.
100%. If I'm Dorion, I understand you have a plan, right? And Melnyk has been on board with this plan, and you have to look at this trade as like, okay, how much farther, how big of a deviance is this plan? You traded, and everyone's going to be like, okay, well, you traded Mark Stone for Brannstrom, and then you had to flip Brannstrom and Norris on a pick for Dubois. And then you can make the argument, who's better, Stone or Dubois? That's an argument that can go either way. Dubois is a lot younger. He's a center. There's a lot more upside to those. You don't get number one centers very often, so you can make that argument.
You could also look at it like, hey, if Erik Karlsson got you Tim Stützle and Mark Stone got you Pierre-Luc Dubois, then we're dancing.
Well, that's the thing. Is that right now we're dancing because, Erik Karlsson got a Stützle and Norris and, Balcers, Tierney. But we might not even need to get rid of Norris. You can package Brannstrom Formenton, or even Brandstrom and Tierney.
Yeah, you could make a bigger package with lesser, I
You
guess,
know,
quality.
quality over quantity. You can make it a quantity package over a quality package.
But does that get the deal done? Again, maybe with the first round pick being involved, maybe it does.
Maybe they look at, you know, if the GM of Columbus looks at it as like, okay, you know, we're getting Tierney, he can play in our top 9 right away. They might not feel Norris is ready. Brandstrom can jump into our top 4 right away. That's great. You know, you can even add in a guy like Balcers or Formenton, one of those fringe wingers that could probably crack Columbus's top 9 this season. You know, and if you're Columbus, you know, your biggest issue was goal scoring. So if you can get 2, 3, 4 guys that can give you that goal scoring ability or help with that goal scoring ability, you had quantity over quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think the trade, again, for both sides, I cannot see for the life of me Columbus getting a better offer than that. And on the flip side, I can't see why Pierre Dorion wouldn't want to make that offer. Like, that's as solid as it gets. Pierre-Luc Dubois, you're not going to find a better center in the draft. We have 2, you know, if we're being honest, you look at the roster, we have 2 glaring holes. One's at center, one's on the right side of the decor. And they're both, you know, top pieces that Ottawa probably needs to build their team. So that basically checks one box off. And then you've got tons of assets left to fill your other need, really, on the right side of the decor. And this thing is set a lot quicker than we thought it could be if this deal could happen.
100%. And like, it's going to be something to watch. I think Ottawa, I know there's talk that Boston kind of kicked tires on it, but, you know, I think Ottawa should be the front runner to acquire this kind of talent due to our cap space and whatnot. It's going to be an interesting storyline to look at going in the next, you know, 2 years, maybe not even, probably the next like 6-7 months.
Yeah, I can't see them holding on to Dubois for very long, especially with they did a press conference today, and it's just the writing is on the wall. This guy doesn't want to be there. I don't know why you would want to surround your locker room with a player that clearly doesn't want to be there. So, yeah, he's going to be moved. I think he'll be moved fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen people talk about White being part of the deal. I don't really know if that's a good idea because him and Chabot are best friends. I don't see you trading one of Chabot's best friends for one of Chabot's other best friends. I don't see that being a smart idea. If you're trying to appease these players, you want as many of them being friends as possible, which is why I think Norris might not be touchable because he's really good friends with Tkachuk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another fair point. I mean, the chemistry in the locker room it's definitely the highlight of Ottawa's rebuild. You know, prior to, if we look back at the Carlson days and that core group, there was a lot of chemistry problems. There was a lot of character problems, and that's why you see DJ Smith and Pierre Dorion, every time they get an opportunity to mention something like character, it's coming across loud and clear. This is a team they're looking to build a ton of character within and a ton of chemistry within.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, we're going to take a break right now. Once we get back, we are going to talk, you know, characters as we got our captains announced. DJ Smith earlier today announced a little bit more of a hint towards next year's captains. We got our over/under, and we also got our top 5 teams we want to see succeed outside of the North Division this year. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.
Did you know that your favorite band also loves your favorite hockey team? If you love hockey and you love music, you're going to love Bar Down Breakdown, a podcast that explores the crossover between alternative music and the sport we love, hockey.
Every NHL player wants to be in a band, and every band guy wants to be in a pro athlete.
With guests from all over the globe, come along with us as we interview some of the most captivating names in alternative music and talk about why we love hockey and how it's influenced us.
You know, there was for a few seconds I thought like, well, maybe we should wear Montreal jerseys, and the NHL was like, I think you should stay neutral. And we're like, yeah, you know what, you're probably right.
So tune in every Tuesday on the Hockey Podcast Network, where we'll have a brand new guest and a unique look into the bridge between hockey and music.
And we are back. That was our bar down breakdown of the Hockey Podcast Network. Great guys, fantastic podcast. And just a quick reminder that we do have our customized jersey contest going on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. These are the rules. Follow us at Sens Hour. Subscribe on YouTube. Let us who you want to get. You can get any player of any team. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be Sens related. And take 3 friends. No issues. Jerseys not included. And you can head on over to customizedsports.com, use Sens Hour, and get 10% off your order. Fantastic quality these guys get. Great to deal with. Great quick shipping. Most of the time, I know some people had issues on the holidays because of Canada Post delays. But with that being said, we're going to jump into it. We were talking character. We're going to continue talking character. And there's a reason for it, because yesterday they didn't wait until like the day before the game to announce their captains. Chabot, Tkachuk, the obvious choice to be named alternates. They both wore the senior at the end of the year. I think the third C was the most talked about. Goodbranson gets it. I said we talked about it earlier a couple of weeks ago that Goodbranson had a chance to come in with like a Hainsey. Were you surprised that Goodbranson got the A? And what do you think it means that Goodbranson got the A?
I was a little bit surprised. I thought Connor Brown would be kind of the front runner for the third one, and I was a little bit surprised. But I think Goodbranson's a character guy. Like, there's no question about that. To me, it speaks to probably the lineup a little bit. I don't think he's going to be a player that, some of us assumed that Goodbranson would be in and out of the lineup. I think he's more of a regular than we think. And early on, he's getting the big minutes with Thomas Chabot. So we'll see if that kind of stays true throughout camp, or if they try to mix it up. But I don't mind it at all. He played with Cam Fowler last year, at the end of last year. And Ducks fans said he looked really, really good there. He's a very likable guy. So I don't have any problem with him getting the A this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those, Ottawa guys, played for Kingston, out east, Orleans, and Blackburn Hamlet kind of guy. He's basically East Ottawa's version of Borowiecki. Like, it would have been fantastic if these two could have played on the same team together. I would have loved it. Ottawa would have been great for it. But this goes into what DJ Smith said today. Tkachuk, Chabot, going to battle it out for the captaincy this season. Who do you think comes on top?
I think Brady Tkachuk, because if it was Thomas Chabot, it would have been done yesterday. I think they're waiting for the contract extension. I really think they see Brady Tkachuk as the leader of the future. And hopefully it doesn't kind of tear any sort of divide between the two of them, because I think they're both suitable captains. I think Chabot would lead in a more subtle, kind of quiet way. But Tkachuk would ultimately probably be the guy standing up in the locker room, when they're down a goal or two going into the third period and saying, like, let's go, guys, let's get fired up. And he would be kind of the more speech kind of leader, a little bit more active. Chabot would probably be more of a leader by example a little bit. Either side, I think they're both great choices for captaincy. I don't have a problem with it. I've said before that I would, I kind of hoped that they waited for someone like Jake Sanderson to come aboard before naming a captain, but that could be a couple of years from now. So that's not realistic to ask. We should also note that Derek Stepan, DJ Smith hinted that Derek Stepan would get the fourth A this season. So another assistant.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they run 4 A's. Got to give it to somebody when one of the three are hurt or just taking a rest, because it is a grind. And you know what, though? The reason why I think I give it to Tkachuk is what he said earlier today. He was quoted saying that our expectations are playoffs.
Yeah.
And I really don't know what more you want from a captain outside of basically being like, we're not going into this division to finish last. We're going to go in there. We're going to compete. We're going to play hard. We're going to be a hard game. And we are going to put our minds to the fact that we can compete. The boys, the men in this dressing room are good enough. We play the systems right. We have the talent to make the playoffs. And I love that. And I know people are going to say it's ballsy, but I think that's exactly what you need from a captain.
Yeah, the hesitancy mindset is something that's just media created, like, and all of us and fan created. We look at, they finished 31st and 30th and 31st and, yeah, not in that order. I think I screwed that up. But but aside from that, they've been at the bottom of the league the last 3 years. So a lot of people just kind of assume that the expectation, especially in a strong division like the North Division, is going to be Ottawa's going to be the 7th place bottom feeding team once again. And Brady Tkachuk's basically dispelling that mindset and saying, no, internally, we think we can win. We think we're a playoff team. And I think he even said a realistic expectation for us is making the playoffs. So that is bold, but that's what you want to hear from your leadership group. You don't want to hear them come out and say, well, we got a lot of new players coming into the lineup, and our plan this year is to just work hard and be in every game. No, we want to make the playoffs.
Which I think is great. I mean, if you're a Sens fan, we talk about the negative Sens fans and the negative side of the Sens fan base a lot. It's very prominent. It's usually the loudest voice in the Sens fan base is always the negativity. I've seen people actually criticize Tkachuk for saying that. I don't know if they're actual Sens fans or people just trolling, and I hope they're just trolls. But how can you criticize you're expecting him and Chabot are expected to be captains. This is probably one of the most captain thing to say. You're not going to have a captain come out and say, well, we're going to hope to be in every game. We're going to play hard, whatnot. Like, you're basically telling the fan base, we're going to play to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go into a job interview and, someone asks you how well you think you're going to do at the job, your answer better not be, well, I'm going to be new, so I don't know if I'm going to be that good right away. I need a little bit of time before I'm really sure of myself. Guess who's not getting the job? You know what I mean? Like you can't go in there and Tkachuk speaking on behalf of his teammates. He's not going to step up to the microphone and show any sort of hesitancy whatsoever. So, yeah, if anyone's criticizing what he said, I think that's idiotic. Like, yeah, of course he's going to step up to the microphone and say, no, we think we're a good team. We think we're a playoff team, and that's where we expect ourselves to be.
It's crazy to think that, we've gone so far. And then people keep bringing up Karlsson and Tkachuk, or Karlsson and Stone and Hoffman. And personally, we have to remember that, from 2014-15, the year that we saw Stone and Hoffman, Pajot kind of break into their own, through into the end of the 17-18 season, we were the 21st best team in the league. And that really tells a lot about, we had these big name players, or what we thought were big name players, but we still weren't good season to season. We had the Hamburglar run, which he won 24 games. And then we have Condon coming in when both our goalies were hurt, and he went on an extremely good run. You take those out, we're kind of middle of the pack. We're probably closer to the bottom. At one point, blame Melnyk, blame Dorion, blame whoever you want to blame. The numbers don't add up to keeping these players long term because they haven't had any success. And I think Dorion has done a good job at turning the corner on that, having a fresh start with these players, and they're like, hey, this is your team. And I think giving Tkachuk and Chabot the A is basically telling them, hey, this is your team. You guys are going to be the ones that bring us to the next level. It starts with you guys. And honestly, as a fan, I love it.
I think it's reinvigorated the fan base from the time Karlsson was dealt, and everything else that snowballed and followed, all the big name players that were lost. I think everyone's able to see kind of the excitement surrounding this team now, and it's reinvigorated the fan base. And it might get to a place where the fan base is actually better than it was previously, when, like you said, Ottawa was not a guaranteed lock to make the playoffs. We're not talking about the 2001 to 2008 Ottawa Senators that were just a lock every year to make the playoffs or whatever it was. I know that the time frame's off there, but that's a totally different scenario. The Erik Karlsson Ottawa Senators were not that team. They were a bubble team, if we're being honest, that had a couple of really nice runs, unexpected runs that led them to close to a Stanley Cup, but not really close to where you could say we'll be back there next year for sure. DJ Smith, Pierre Dorion, Eugene Melnyk, even, they're trying to build a team that year after year are going to be contending for the Stanley Cup in a genuine sort of sense, not in a we hope to be 8th place in the standings and then get in the playoffs and see what happens. No, we hope to be number 1, number 2, or number 3 in the standings, and everyone else is going to hope to play as good as we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Ottawa, you want to be like Tampa. You want to be like Tampa or Boston, one of these teams that you go into being like, okay, well, they're going to be top of their division. Obviously, anything can happen in the playoffs. We've seen it, we saw it in 2017 when Ottawa went to the Eastern Conference Finals. We saw it in 2012 when the Kings slotted in as that 8th seed and went on to win the Cup. That's not the issue. The issue is they slotted in as the 8th seed. Ottawa tooth and nail that year to get in as the 3rd seed in the Atlantic. We don't want to fight tooth and nail. We want to be able to look at the season and be like, we'll win like 50-some games. We'll be a top 2 team. We'll be in the President's Trophy race year in and year out, which would put you in the Stanley Cup contending race year in and year out. And I think that's all that really matters.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to do, and that's all you can hope for as a fan of a team. You want your team to be a legitimate contender, not a pretender. And for many years, Ottawa was a pretender. And if you're in the playoffs, like you said, anything could happen. So it really is about getting there every year. Unless your name is San Jose Sharks, then nothing can happen for you, even if you're in the playoffs every year.
Yeah, that's true. Or Toronto, you lose 4 straight years.
Or the Leafs, yeah. But speaking of other teams, let's get into this list that we have going, because I think it'll be a good discussion. I'm curious to see, we decided to make a list of every team outside of our North Division. So top 5 teams that we're kind of pulling for quietly this season, and kind of justifying those choices. So why don't you start with your 5th team, Shane?
So number 5, outside of the North Division, this is going to come as a surprise to some people, but I got the Philadelphia Flyers as my 5th seed in that East Division. I like Hart. I like Konechny, Giroux, local boy. Konechny played for the 67s. I love Provorov. Would love him in Ottawa, not even going to lie. He's just one of those guys that you love to watch. I just love everything about Philly. I love Philly hockey. I miss the Ottawa-Philly matchups. Like, I'm going to miss that this year. They were always really good games, physical games, and it's just Philly deserves a run. I don't even care if they win. They just deserve another run. I think they're going to do well, and I'm pulling for them to finish top 3. I was playing them last year, and they're going to be one of my favorites to watch this year.
Yeah, and Carter Hart in net. I mean, when your goaltending position is secure like theirs is, they're going to be, like I said, like we were just talking about, they're probably going to be contenders for many years to come thanks to that goaltending situation.
And Nolan Patrick is expected to be back this year. I've heard some rumblings about that. I don't know how serious it is, but from what I've seen on Twitter, they are hopeful that he'll be back playing games this year. And I love Nolan Patrick. I know people are saying that he's a bust because of his head injury, like his headache issues, or his like they're not even. I don't even think they're post-concussion symptoms anymore. They're actually just like migraine issues, which is a win in and out of itself. So if he can be back playing, I think they're going to solidify that top 9 with him, and this team's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, a couple of nice stories there with Lindblom as well. So. Good stories to look out for in Philly. I like the choice. For 5, I went with the New York Islanders. I just liked their style of play. I think it kind of radiates from Lou Lamoriello kind of down. He's got that old school hockey philosophy, and I know a lot of people don't like him as a GM, and I'm kind of one of them. Like, I don't really like him as a GM, but at the same time, I like the hockey team that's there on the island. I think, when JG Pageau went there, it made it easier for me to cheer for them. I just like their style of play, and I also like their fan base. Like, I honestly think they have some of the best fans. I know after Tavares got traded to the Leafs, some of the most fun I had was watching the Islanders absolutely slap around the Leafs and the fan base just screaming, "We don't need you." I think it was just electric.
Yeah, I will admit the Islanders are going to be, if we were doing top 10, they would be in my top 10. They're not in my top 5, but I agree that they should be a fun team to watch, especially if they can get Barzal to sign, Pageau. Like, I love Anders Lee. I think he's a great captain for them.
Yeah.
They have the right choice after Tavares left. So I'm excited to see what they can do this season, and relatively a stacked division like always.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them, but I'm still pulling for them quietly. How about number 4?
Number 4, might become a surprise, but it's Carolina. I'm going to let you all know I only have one Western team here. I'm pulling for a lot of Eastern teams. But Carolina, I love Mrazek. Reimer combo is going to be great. Dougie Hamilton, Slavin, fantastic combo. You can't not love like Aho and Shefnikov and everyone else that got going there. I don't really care for Dzingel. I was never a huge Dzingel fan. But overall, I love that team. I love the atmosphere that they've brought to the NHL since they went under new ownership, the storm surge, everything like that. Rob Brindamore. They're just a fantastic team. I really hope that we see another push from the Hurricanes.
Yeah, Carolina's really a groundbreaking team. Like, they're doing things their own way, even from their social media accounts that they run. They just kind of have fun with it in a way that is less kind of black and white. It's very fun. So everything about that team is very fun. I agree with what you said. I actually now looking at my list, I'm regretting not having them on my list because that is one of the teams that I really always kind of pull for. I like their core group of players, like you mentioned. For me, number 4, I went with the Rangers just because I think it's going to be exciting this year. So I went right back to New York, but Alexis Lafreniere, Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin's there, one of the best goal scorers in the game. I can't stand Tony DeAngelo, but aside from him, I like the rest of their core. I'm not a huge Strome fan either, but I'm more so excited to see what the number 1 overall pick, Alexis Lafreniere, is going to do to the Rangers group. Accompanied by big-time goal scorers like Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin.
That's fair. And I mean, so I understand why a lot of people dislike Tony DeAngelo. I do. I know he is a very controversial individual, but I love what he brings to the ice. I think he's
not a bad player.
He's a very good player, and he is someone outside of him as a person. I have no comment on it. I'm not, because I don't really care about people's in that aspect. But he's the guy that I would love player-wise in Ottawa. I think he would complement Ottawa's team very well as a player. I know some people are like, oh, you don't want that kind of energy in the locker room. I get it. But as a player, if you look at his skill set, he brings a lot to the table. But at number 3 for me, and this is my only Western team, it's the Colorado Avalanche. You talk about social media presence, they're right there alongside Carolina as one of the best social media teams in the league, let alone in pro sports. McKinnon, always love McKinnon. He's going to do great things. You add in guys like Saad, who got traded there. Obviously, I want to see Makar. I want to see what Byram does this year. And Devon Taves ended up in Colorado. So I'm really interested to see what happens. I was kind of disappointed that Colorado got Devon Taves. I thought that would be a guy Ottawa was going to target on the right side. But either way, I like Colorado. I think they're going to run that division. And I'm excited to see what they do. I'm really excited to watch this guys play this year.
Yeah, I think Colorado is going to run not just the division, but they're probably going to run the league a little bit next season.
Them and Tampa, I think, are going to be 1-2.
Yeah, but Tampa without Kucherov could be, a little bit different.
You're getting Stamkos back.
Yeah,
it's not like you're going in there without Stamkos. So
if he comes back and he's Stamkos that we know, then
probably fine. for those couple of shifts that he had in the playoffs, he looked
Yeah,
like
he still looked pretty good. He scored a goal, didn't he? And like his opening shift.
Yeah,
I remember that.
So like, who knows? I think we could expect a good amount of stuff from Stamkos. I'm not overly worried about it.
All right. Yeah. Number 3, I went with a Western team. I went with Mark Stone and the Vegas Golden Knights. I shouldn't just say Mark Stone, but there's my reason why I went with the Golden Knights. I've always loved Mark Stone. I still feel kind of attached to this player. And then, of course, Robin Lehner as well with the Vegas Golden Knights. It just has a bit of a Sens feel to it. Even if it's yesterday's Sens, I still kind of want to see Mark Stone do well because I think he's a terrific leader. I kind of I drew some parallels from Tim Stützle's kind of animated faces that he made throughout the games, and it really brought me back to the Mark Stone intensity. You could feel it. You could feel it through the TV screen after Stützle scores a goal, and it's a lot like Mark Stone. It didn't seem to matter for Stone if it was him scoring or anyone else on his team. He showed that same kind of animation, and that's why I'm pulling for Vegas, really because of those 2 players.
I agree, and I know they announced that there will be a captain for Vegas this year. I'm interested because of the storylines. In I don't actually care for Vegas. I'm interested about the storylines. You know, you added Pietrangelo. You traded away Schmidt and Stasny. I don't know how much better you are doing that. There's talk of, you know, Pacioretty and Marchessault being on the table because you have to get underneath the cap. And if that's the case, how much better are you really adding? Like, how much better of a team are you with adding Pietrangelo if you had to go make those moves? And with him, you know, he was captain of St. Louis. So there's a lot of talk with Stone being named captain. If you're Pietrangelo, they name captain. Is that kind of a backhand to Stone, depending on that situation? There's so many storylines. You have the Fleury-Leonard storyline.
Yeah, they kind of screwed up the locker room in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. I absolutely agree there.
Like, I don't care about the team itself. I don't care what they do on the ice. I'm just interested about the off-ice storylines. What happens throughout the season? How this team? How can DeBoer? Because realistically, all of this falls on DeBoer. This has nothing, and it's not his fault. It's not. He's not the one going out making the moves. He's not the one going out signing the players or whatever. So that's the guy that I'm looking at. I'm like, if I'm DeBoer, you have to manage this. It's not your mistake. It's not your mess. You're the one who has to clean it up. So I agree. They're going to be fun to watch. The storylines are what interests me.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest reasons. But I think the storylines in Vegas, I mean, if we look at this situation probably next year and a couple of years later, we're going to look at this team and say they could have been so good and they got rid of so many young players because of one kind of faulty season where they contended unexpectedly right out of the gate. And they just got excited. They got super excited, and they were like, okay, let's start bringing in star player after star player and, you know, basically pissing away the cap. They've got like nothing left. And now they've got to start selling players off. And this fan base has never seen a team lose. So it's going to be interesting if they could keep the fan base around, because I really think Vegas is probably going to be a bottom feeder team after this season. Probably after next season, we'll see a steadily declining Vegas team because they got rid of so many good young players.
I agree 100%. Imagine this Vegas team that had Cody Glass, Nick Suzuki, and Brandstrom on their roster. Like, and then you traded away Brandstrom for Stone, which, I mean, a lot of people would probably take that as a win. And you traded away Suzuki and Tatar for Pacioretty.
Not a win.
Hey, Pacioretty was your leading goal scorer. Suzuki's turning out to be a number 1 center.
If they went all the way and won the cup, it would be worth it. Because they didn't, now, like we're talking about, they're going to have to start selling off some of these guys, and really, what are you going to get for them?
Yeah, it's bad for Vegas. But at number 2, another Eastern team, the Boston Bruins. And the reason why I have Boston is you don't have Pasternak and you probably don't have Marchand to start the season.
Yeah.
You lost Torrey Krug to St. Louis. You had made the argument of how committed you wanted to be to Krug. He's pushing 30. You have McAvoy and Brendan Carlo in the wings. You know, so those are, and then you go ahead and let go of Chara, which personally I have no issue with. He's 43. He lost a step. He was one of your bottom pairing defensemen in the playoffs. So, you know, there's that. So there's still some question marks around this team heading into the season. Is Rass still disgruntled? Because I know there was talk about during the playoffs that he was disgruntled. There's a lot of question marks around this team. They're going to be interesting to watch for basically the same reasons for Vegas, but because of who they have, DeBrusque and whatnot, they could make a run for it in that division. And they've been such a powerhouse in the Atlantic the last couple of years. Could we start seeing the downfall of Boston? Maybe. And it's just for that alone, I'm very intrigued to watch this Boston team this season.
All right, I went with some intrigue as well for number 2. I went with the Buffalo Sabres. Adding Taylor Hall to the mix. You've got Jack Eichel, he's one of my favorite players to watch. He's just an electric player. And I love that kind of upright skating style that he skates with. I think it's extremely deceiving. You're watching that guy fly around, and he's kind of standing straight up on the ice. It looks really odd, but he's just such a good player. Of course, Dylan Cousins, if he does join the team, I don't know if he is joining the team or not after the World Juniors, but if he does this season, that would be something else to look forward to. But of course, they've got Rasmus Dahlin, they've got Ristolainen, they've got all these offensive weapons, and they've never been able to put anything together. Question marks remain in net, but we'll see what the Buffalo Sabres could do, and I'm excited to see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned Buffalo as your number 2 because they're my number 1 team. You mentioned Eichel and you mentioned Hall being added. I think the one thing that kind of has been overlooked is the acquisition of Eric Stahl. I know he's 36, I believe.
Yeah.
But him and Skinner are back together, and these guys were one of the best duos in the league with their time when they were healthy with each other in Carolina. I know Olofsson is dealing with an injury day to day, but if you're looking at a top 6, there's still Sam Reinhart. So if you're looking at a top 6 that includes Taylor Hall, Jack Eichel, and Sam Reinhart as your first line, your second line of Skinner, Stahl, and Olofsson and that's fantastic. You add in a guy like Dylan Cousins or Jack Quinn, who I believe both of them will be expected to join the Sabres after the World Juniors. They're not mentioned on the roster, but I don't think that's necessary because they won't be eligible to do it anyways. If they have to do a 7-day quarantine, they'll basically be available like 2 days before the season opens. So there's no point of adding them. But I think they're both, from my understanding, they're both expected to go to Buffalo after the World Juniors. So I'm excited to see what they do. I'm really excited to see what happens with this Buffalo team. You mentioned Ristolainen and Dahlin. They have Montour. And I'm really excited to see if Carter Hutton can bounce back. He had eye surgery that he was dealing with some problems, depth perception last season. Could that surgery help him find his game? 100%. There's so many, and Eichel finally has a player to play with consistently in Hall. I think those guys are going to match up perfectly together. I'm really excited to watch this team play. And I think they can squeeze into a playoff spot. I think they can squeeze into a top 4 spot in a very tough division this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And Eichel's kind of out of excuses now as to why things won't work out in Buffalo because they did surround them with a lot of talented players. And as you mentioned, is it Eric Stahl or Jordan Stahl?
Eric Stahl.
It's Eric Stahl joining the team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just reading that he was encouraging his line mate, Sam Reinhart, to shoot the puck more. So he wants to see more shots out of Reinhart. And my number 1 team, you mentioned it earlier, but it's Colorado. I just think they're the most exciting team to watch in hockey. I really, with the addition of Byram, you've got Cale Makar there already on the blue line. Obviously, McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, the most dominant line in hockey. It's just, to me, it's the most fun team to watch because it's the most structured team to watch. Like that team, the way they could dominate, it really does bring me back to those early 2000s Senators days of, Spezza, Heatley, and Alfredson. And, when that group was on the ice, just how dominant they were. It looked like the Globetrotters at times. And that's what it looks like in Colorado.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm really excited to see Colorado. Like I said before, they have a lot of interesting pieces. They've added a couple of interesting pieces. this year is going to be so weird. And I mean, there are teams that I'm interested in watching. You know, I'm interested to see what happens with Minnesota. They've unloaded a couple of contracts. Pittsburgh, there's some question marks around, you know, can these guys rebound? What's the goaltending situation like? Washington's obviously going to be in discussion all the time. But, you know, that Central Division is going to be the most interesting. The West Division as well, because you have like what happens with Arizona. So there's so many question marks around the league. But I think these top five, like these 5 teams, or 7 teams that we mentioned, or 7, 8 teams that we mentioned, they're going to be the most intriguing, in my opinion. I can see the Rangers. You know, you have your second and first overall picks back-to-back years, Kakko, Lafreniere, with guys like Panarin and Zibanejad, Strome, and whatnot. So it's going to be real interesting what this year happens. And we're going to be so focused on the North Division that, you know, these storylines could squeak by.
Yeah, and with the Rangers too, with Shesterkin and net. I mean, the Calder race is going to be fun to watch too, because I think we'll definitely have some players in there. So for us personally, it's going to be fun to follow. But also, you know, for players like Zegras, who we're expecting to be in it, and Shesterkin and Lafreniere, you know, all these top rookie players, it's going to be one hell of a race this season, and in a 56-game season. So it's all going to be condensed.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun to watch. But, you know, going on to our last segment, we're over an hour, but, you know, a lot to break down. We kind of touched on his over-under earlier in season 2, but we're going to do it now. Dadonov, his goals, I think we have it set at 20.5 goals in a 56-game season. Are you taking the over-under on this?
Yeah, so essentially, like the 20 goals will work out to a 30-goal pace. We should break that down first over a full 82-game season. So what we're saying is he going to be a 30-goal guy if it was a typical 82-game season? But of course, you know, prorated to 56 games at 28.5. Given who he's playing with in Brady Tkachuk, who gets to the net a lot, and probably will score a fair chunk of those goals, I'm going to take the under on Dadonov. I think he'll score on the power play. He'll do some scoring. He's a guy who could deliver as well, 5-on-5. I don't think he'll be quite at a 30-goal pace over 82, so I don't think he'll be quite at a 20-goal pace. I think he'll be just underneath it. So I'm going to go with like 18 goals.
That's fair. And I mean, it's going to be interesting. We don't really know any of the line combinations right now because not everyone's there. I'm going to take the over. I'm going to put him at like 23 goals. I think we're going to see him. I don't even think we're going to see him on the first power play unit. Honestly, I would be very surprised I would not be surprised if we see him on the second unit. Spread out the goal scoring, especially if you want him on that right side. They could say, screw it, we're going to spread out the scoring, put him with a guy like Logan Brown, Lannon, Brandstrom, like kind of spread out the power play instead of overloading the first unit, because we know that doesn't always work out. So I'm interested to see, but I'm going to give him the over. I think he'll get some. I think he'll score. I think he's going to score 12 power play goals, and the rest are going to be even strength.
Nice. Yeah. So a nice even spread there.
Yeah, I think we're going to see him get like about a 50-50 split on the goals, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. But he's here for 3 years, so we should get used to him.
Yeah. My kind of fear is just that he's away from Barkov and Huberdeau, and just watching back some of the goals, like a lot of them were high-end skilled passes setting him up. So now he's going to be in a circumstance where he's probably going to have to create his own offense a little bit. So I'm just curious to see where that goes with Dadonov.
100%. Another question mark that we can look at, and hopefully we'll have answers to heading into the season as people arrive. Before we let you go, just going to let you guys know, Stützle is in Ottawa, apparently. He arrived today. Stefan is supposed to be in Ottawa. And then Coburn and Paquette are apparently finishing up their quarantines. Then they should be able to finish the ice this week. So we expect a full body of players some point in the next week and a half, according to DJ Smith. And we'll be keeping you guys updated. Check out our social medias, Instagram, Twitter, as we find more information, as more information is release, we'll be able to relay it to you guys. But that'll be all for this episode, folks. Thank you all for joining us. Remember, subscribe to YouTube, like us on Instagram, Twitter, and we have our Customized Sports jersey giveaway. Your chance to win a free kit for any reverse retro. Follow me at Shane_Ryan97, Derek at Dealey075. Check him out. Send Shot and New Era Sends for all your Sends article needs. And we'll be back here with a brand new episode Monday, Thursdays. We got 2 weeks, basically, until our first game. Just about there. Friday the 15th against Toronto.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's about time.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Have a good one, guys. We'll see you next time.